Bikram Yoga has become one of the most well-known forms of yoga in the US since its founder, Bikram Choudhury, introduced it in Beverly Hills, California in the 1970s. Not only is this style of yoga beloved by celebrities like Madonna, David Beckham, and Lady Gaga, but its founder is just as loved, if not more, according to him. Choudhury claims that everyone loves him, including presidents' daughters, prime ministers' daughters, billionaires' daughters, superstar actors, just to name a few. While that may be true in his mind, in the public eye and even the courts, Bikram has spent decades using his power, status, and wealth to take advantage and violate countless female students of his. He has been sued by about half a dozen women over the past decade, fled the US to evade paying the $7 million he was ordered to pay to one of them. Yet, he still has a thriving career as a yogi all over the world, and many yoga studios, even in the US, still use the Bikram name. I just want to quickly apologize for the white noise that's in the background of this video. I don't know why it's there or what I did to cause it, but I'll try to fix it before I make the next video. So today we're going to go into the story of Bikram Yoga and Bikram Choudhury a little bit. I'm going to refer to the yoga as Bikram and the guy as Choudhury, but this isn't going to be a deep dive of any means. There is a Netflix documentary from 2019 called Bikram Yogi, Guru, Predator, which it says that it charts the rise and fall of hot yoga founder Bikram Choudhury as his global empire is born and disturbing revelations come to light. So if you have Netflix, you can go and check it out. I don't have it, so I haven't actually seen it, but I have read different articles and watch videos related to it, and of course there's tons of other information out there on this topic aside from just in that documentary, but in my video I want to kind of talk about some of his allegations and the lawsuits that have come up from that, and then his responses, and just kind of hopefully give you a little bit of an understanding of his personality, how he acts, how he views himself, how he views other people, and we're going to take a look at where he is now, because I'm sure most of us hopefully will agree that there have not been as many consequences for his actions as he deserves. And then also in the conclusion part, I want to talk a little bit about just predatory behavior in the spiritual community in general, because I mean, going to yoga classes isn't inherently spiritual, but it's kind of in the field, especially yoga in the US does generally fit into the category of like new age spirituality for a lot of people who practice it. They're also into new age stuff, and there's a lot of people who maybe not in the way that Bikram or Choudhury did it, but there's a lot of people in this community, and of course unfortunately like pretty much any community, people taking advantage of others, people using their power, their status, their money to get what they want, to get people to shut up about the bad things that they do. So I want to talk about that too. So first of all, I want to mention a trigger warning for sexual harassment and abuse. I'm not going to go into any graphic detail, but it is going to be a large focus of the video and the allegations, and I'm going to refer to them as SH, SA, and then R word. And I also wanted to mention for my subscribers, I just started my third year of college. I'm taking more courses than I ever have in the past, so I'm going to have a lot less time to work, and I don't make nearly as much money on YouTube as I used to, so in order to kind of try to make this work, still I want to start making shorter videos. Aside from that, they're going to be, I guess, more podcast style, like more, I know a lot of people just listen to my videos, so I'm going to kind of try to shift them to that. Like I'll probably be looking at my script more, which is probably annoying for people who like to watch, but I'll also be including less things on the screen. That's just going to make it easier for me. Shorter videos with less time put into editing is going to allow me to make more content, which will hopefully allow me to make enough money to live off of from YouTube. But if you like longer content, I also have a Patreon where I do a weekly live stream. They end up being like an hour and a half to 2.5 hours long. We've talked about Teal Swan, incel forums, Jordan Peterson, mukbang content, breatharianism, a lot of different topics. So you can go check that out in the description. It's $3.33 a month if you're into that longer content, but otherwise I don't know if the content will be more frequent on YouTube because like I'm a full-time student, you know. So sorry to all you guys who like the longer videos. That's what I prefer to make too, but it's just not possible for me at the moment. So with that all being said, let's get into the video. So Bikram Choudhury was born in Kolkata, India in 1944, making him 77 or maybe 78 today. Bikram came to the US in the 70s and introduced Bikram Yoga to the people of Beverly Hills, California. If you don't know, Bikram Yoga is a type of hot yoga where the room temperature is set to 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius. There's also a certain kind of humidity level that it has to be, and it lasts for 90 minutes. Unlike a lot of other popular types of yoga where there's like a ton of different poses and each class you're going to be doing different ones in different orders, Bikram Yoga is a set sequence of 26 different poses or asanas that you do. Like every class you're doing them in the same order basically. Back in 2011 he tried to claim and convince people that he had this copyright on Bikram Yoga and like the specific sequence of the poses, and he would first threaten legal action to any like studios that were using the name without his permission or doing something too close to it, I suppose. And he eventually did try to sue two studios who he thought were infringing on his copyright, but the courts in both of those cases claimed that there was no infringement taking place because yoga poses and sequences of exercises cannot be copyrighted or copywritten. Like you can't like copyright burpees or push-ups or do 5 burpees, 5 push-ups, 10 pull-ups in that order. You can't copyright that sequence of exercises. That's ridiculous. But don't worry though, he would be just fine without winning those 2 lawsuits because according to an article from The Guardian, his net worth is over 75 million US dollars. Some of that money he has spent on his car collection of what's reported to be over 40 cars. A lot of people don't know this, but the more cars you own, the more spiritual and enlightened you are. That might seem kind of excessive, but in general, he's a pretty simple guy. He's known for wearing nothing but a black Speedo and a gold Rolex watch when teaching classes. And I used to do hot vinyasa yoga, and I never saw a man in a Speedo or wearing like a luxury designer type watch. But Choudhury's different, you know, he's special, he likes to stand out, he's an important person. When he was once asked why he thinks Americans are so fascinated by yoga, he said, because of me. He's apparently taught people like a couple mentioned earlier, Lady Gaga, Madonna, David Beckham, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Elvis Presley, Richard Nixon, who he also claimed to apparently have saved from getting his leg amputated. This is my favorite part of spirituality. You know, Choudhury once said in an interview,
I'm the most spiritual man, David, you ever met in your life.
There are so many people who you'd expect to be down to earth, not superficial, not always trying to convince people how great they are, but many of the most influential figures in spiritual movements are like this. They're no different than somebody who's more worldly, less spiritual than them. So now let's get into the lawsuits regarding SH and SA. These are, of course, allegations. There has been one that we'll talk about that he was found guilty in court, but the rest technically are allegations. I personally believe them, but just gonna cover my bases. They're all alleged. So Choudhury has been involved in a lot of lawsuits. Like there's articles that kind of talk about the main like 6 or maybe 7 ones, but he has been involved in a lot of others that probably all didn't really go anywhere, otherwise people would have talked about them. But you can go on these like legal type websites and like see that his name, his company have been involved in a lot of different lawsuits with other people and other companies, but I'm not really going to go into those at all. But as you'll see, and as I already kind of mentioned before, he used his status as the creator of Bikram Yoga to mistreat people who were attending his class, but even more so those who were taking his yoga teacher training courses. So he would teach courses and basically certify people as Bikram Yoga instructors, and that's where a lot of the bad stuff took place because he had more control over these people who had given him $10,000 to take these classes and wanted to have a career. There's a lot of stuff about him that I just don't have the time to go into, but a lot of people who took his classes reported him being very like harsh and rude, saying racist, homophobic things, but the main thing is his repeated behavior of SA, SH, and R-wording women, allegedly. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people in these classes who knew what was going on, what he was doing to women, and they didn't say anything. These women were sometimes told to separate the teacher from the teaching. Sorry, I meant to say separate the teacher from the person. Some didn't want to give Bikram Yoga a bad name, so they just ignored it. This is something that happens to a lot of groups, right? People high up in the Catholic Church, for example, know about the P-word stuff that goes on, but they don't want the public to know about it, so they don't do anything about it. They try to suppress information that comes out about it because it negatively impacts the Catholic Church. They care more about the Catholic Church than the children who are being affected by these P-word people in the church. The reputation of the group is more important than the safety and well-being of those harmed by the group. So let's get into the lawsuits. So the first one we're going to talk about involves a woman named Mickey Jaffa Baden. She was at one time employed by Choudhury. She was actually the lawyer for Choudhury's Yoga College of India, but she reported that he SH'd her repeatedly while she was working for him, and at some point she began investigating claims from other employees of SH and SA from Choudhury, and she started to realize that this was happening to a lot of women there. But when he found out that she was doing this, he fired her. So she sued him for SH, wrongful termination, and gender discrimination. She won, and he was ordered to pay over $7 million, but unfortunately, like I said, he fled the country, the US, and now he's still been teaching classes in like Spain, India, Mexico. This all took place in 2016 when the lawsuit happened and he fled the country, and we're gonna mention this, talk about this more later, but it's just these allegations have been going on for a decade at this point, and really the only consequence he's faced is that he's had to flee the country, and I assume if he wanted to come back, like, he'd be arrested, but it's like he has really not faced any actual consequences because he still has a thriving career in these other countries of the world. And so it's just really sad. So many allegations over a decade. These aren't new things. But anyways, Mickey ended up taking over the company after he fled, so I hope she got some of her money that way, you know. Sarah Bond was a Bikram teacher who filed an SH lawsuit stating that he relentlessly pursued her for years and then SA'd her and sabotaged her Bikram Yoga teaching career after she refused to respond to the constant come-ons from Choudhury. That suit also described how he would ask female students to massage him and brush his hair. Again, I don't want to get into the details of it. It's gross to hear about. Of course, the details to an extent are out there about some things, but that's about as deep as we're gonna get into that, because even that, just hearing about a guy, a predator like him, having female students brush his hair, that just grosses me out. But he was doing a lot of stuff like that, kind of, in my opinion, as a way of like easing women into a position where he could more easily do the things that he wanted to do to them. Some of the women that he SH and SA'd, like Sarah, were people who were taking or had taken his Bikram teacher training course for $10,000, but he would only let these teachers open up their own studios with his permission, which meant he could revoke it at any time, or so he told them, I guess. Like, legally he couldn't, but that's what he convinced people because of his perception of copyright. And so one of the reasons that some of these women would stay silent about what he did to them was because exposing what he had done would or could be the end of their career as a Bikram Yoga teacher that they had just spent $10,000 on in 9 weeks of their life training to be able to do. He would also guilt them into silence by saying that if they came forward with their allegations, it would hurt the Bikram community. And for a lot of people, of course, these people who are training to be teachers, Bikram Yoga is a huge part of their life. It's very important to them. The community is very important to them. A lot of people who do things like, and not just yoga, like CrossFit, going to the gym, or there's just so many things that are not even exercise related that like when you're part of a community and it has a large impact on you, you don't want to hurt that community, right? A lot of these students and teachers, of course, they care very deeply about Bikram Yoga and the community because of how it's impacted their lives, and so they don't want to feel like they're doing something bad by giving it a bad name, you know. So there are two women that filed suits anonymously, and they're referred to as Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2. So Jane Doe 1 accused him of S. battery, false imprisonment, discrimination, harassment, and SA. The suit describes the atmosphere of the yoga studio as being cult-like and claims other persons in defendant Bikram Choudhury's inner circle, which later was said to be about 25 people, were aware of defendant Bikram Choudhury's pattern and practice of causing, inducing, or persuading young women to enroll in the teacher training classes to become yoga instructors only so he can SA and or R-word them. Before Choudhury R-worded this woman, the suit claims that he told her, "I need to spiritually enlighten you. In order to do that, we need to become one." Jane Doe 2 took the teacher training course, and she said that it would begin at 7 a.m. and they would go all the way until 2 or 3 a.m., which definitely seems like that could have been used to deprive the students of sleep. Sleep deprivation for a 9-week period can lead to slowed thinking, poor decision making, worsened memory, a lack of energy, of course. And this is a tactic that cults use. I'm not gonna talk about cult stuff related to Bikram Yoga, but it's just, this is like a well-known thing, right? That cults do use sleep deprivation as a way to more easily influence, control, and take advantage of their members. This of course makes people more vulnerable to predators like Choudhury. Anyways, I'm going to read a little bit more about Jane Doe 2's lawsuit from an article from The Guardian. So it says, during weeks of grueling training, Choudhury singled out Jane Doe 2, claiming she was a piece of gold in a room full of brass. His approaches became more sexual and were rebuffed. The suit alleges the exhausted student was R-worded when she was too weak and overwrought to fight him off. The suits paint a cult-like atmosphere at the training camps. Trainees were allegedly told that Choudhury is on the same level as Jesus Christ or Buddha, that Bikram Yoga can cure cancer, and that practitioners will be able to live to 100 years old. Trainees were bullied and humiliated, as well as praised, the suit says, and Choudhury allegedly gave lectures in which he disparaged gays, Americans, and made ethnic slurs. Jane Doe 2 claims that Choudhury recruits volunteers from overseas who are so in fear of defendant Bikram Choudhury's wrath that they will travel to the US and risk violating immigration laws in order to serve him. Once in the US, these volunteers work for little or zero pay. Their duties include grooming him, massaging him, making his tea, bringing him food, and being forced to submit to essays and R-words against their will, the suit alleges. Jill Lawler was a young woman who was just 18 years old when she was in Bikram teacher training. She filed a suit against him in 2019 after she says he SA'd and R-worded her repeatedly over the course of 2 years. The suit said, feeling that she had no choice in her weakened, exhausted, and sleep-deprived state, she gave in to defendant Bikram Choudhury's physical and financial coercion. She also said that Choudhury once told her that people who don't listen to him die. I don't know what to say about that. That's obviously very scary, and whether it was just a threat or an actual truth, I of course don't know. I don't even know if he said that, right? It's just an allegation. But given the way that he speaks in interviews that I've seen, and hopefully I've been able to play some in the video, but I don't want to get like the video taken down for copyright problems. But if you go and watch videos on your own, which I recommend you do, to really get a feel for how he acts and his mannerisms and all that stuff, I think that is not something I'd be surprised if he said, but more as a threat because I think he gives off the impression of somebody who says a lot of stuff that isn't true. I don't know if he believes his lies or not, but he definitely does say a lot of stuff that is just way too bizarre, or like no one's gonna believe it, and we'll go into some more later. But still, that's an awful thing to tell somebody, even if it's not true. To threaten that, of course, is disgusting. A student named Maggie Genthner had been R-worded by him twice. Student Larissa Anderson said that she was once at his Beverly Hills home while Choudhury's wife and children were upstairs in bed, like sleeping. It was at night, and he R-worded Larissa and then told her to keep quiet afterwards. A woman named Mandeep Kaur Sandhu was SA'd by him when he asked her to give him a massage, and she wasn't doing the sexual things that he asked her to do, so he basically physically made acts to force her to do them. Petra Stark, who was the president of Bikram Yoga College of India, filed a lawsuit against him and the company for wrongful termination. A black woman named Pandora Williams sued him after he kicked her out of his teacher training course and said, "Get that black B word out of here, she's a cancer." And he also refused to refund her the $10,000 fee. So those are all of the main lawsuits that have been talked about in articles and videos more. Of course, like I said, there are a lot more. He's been sued a lot of times, and he's sued people too. But the director of the Netflix documentary, her name is Eva Orner, she, in the documentary, included testimonies from some men who they knew what was happening to these women, and she said it was important to include these testimonies because, quote, "You need men to acknowledge that they knew and they didn't do anything. One of the things moving forward that we have to have is men standing up for us when they see things that are wrong." And I think that's what's really scary about this. I mean, there's a lot of things that are scary about this, but like it's not like, oh, he was doing these things behind closed doors, and to everybody else they just thought he was this perfect guy, right? People in these classes, they saw what he was doing. They saw the way that he treated women. They saw him being way too touchy-feely with women, getting too close to them. They knew the events that were happening. They knew he was SAing. They knew he was SHing, and they didn't do anything. That's scary. That's scary to know that multiple people in a community can know that illegal things are being done to people, and they're just not going to say anything about it. According to an interview with Eva Orner in 2019, 4 of the lawsuits were settled civilly and 2 were pending at that time. It was a couple years ago. Maybe it's different, but a lot of articles actually don't talk about where the state of the lawsuits are, so that's really all I have to go off of. But tragically, his beloved car collection now belongs to the state of California because the lawsuits put him on the brink of bankruptcy. That was in 2016, but then in 2017, Bikram Inc. filed for bankruptcy. In 2015, his wife filed for divorce. So it's like those are obviously consequences that he's faced too, but they're obviously not like the proper consequences that somebody who has done the things that he's done deserves, right? Oh, you get your 40 cars taken away, like, okay, you'll be fine. Filing for bankruptcy obviously probably had a big impact on him. That was his company though. Like, he might have his own money. I'm sure even if he fled the country with barely anything, like, I'm sure he's made a lot of it back. So moving on to his response, and just kind of the way that he's addressed the situation and some other things that he said. So he said that Sarah Bond, Jill Lawler, and Maggie Genthner were all lying. He calls the women who accused him of SA and SH trash and says, "I picked them from the trash and give them life." One of his defenses is that he obviously doesn't even need to SA because
If I need women, I can make a line, the most beautiful, famous, rich women in the world.
He says something in this one interview that's a little hard to understand. Like, English isn't his first language, but the interviewer clarifies, asking him,
5,000 women a day want to sleep with you?
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, and proceeds to claim that 4 women took their lives because he wouldn't sleep with them. He also said, "Why would I SH women?
People pay $1 million for one drop of my sperm."
I can make $1 million every day. It's things like that that make me question, like, does he believe these things he's saying, or does he not believe them but he thinks he's going to convince other people of them, or something else? Because it's like the claims that he makes are so ridiculous that they would be hilarious if it wasn't for the nature of this whole topic and story. You know, obviously nobody would spend $1 million for a drop of his sperm. Obviously he cannot make a line of the most beautiful, famous, rich women in the world to sleep with. Obviously 4 women did not take their own lives because he wouldn't sleep with them. I mean, to make something like that up is astonishing. I've never heard anything like that before. I don't believe it for a second. And obviously 5,000 women a day do not want to sleep with him. So of course he denies all the allegations. He clearly has no remorse. He clearly doesn't care about anyone besides himself. But he has said things that indicate he acknowledges that he has some sort of self-control issues regarding women, which of course isn't an admission of guilt, but I feel like it does indicate it's like, even if he hadn't said this, I would believe these women's stories, but it doesn't make him look better by saying these, by admitting these things. So some quotes from him. He says, "The hardest problem in my life is staying away from women. Women likes me, and I have to run city after city, country after country to stay away from the women."
Every woman loves me. You know, president's daughter, you know, prime minister's daughter, you know, billionaire's daughter, superstar, actress, singers. But yogi is supposed to be yogi. They cannot involve with the women.
I mean, he's almost 80 years old, acting like women are all over him. I mean, does he think he's Hugh Hefner or something? He makes it sound like, oh, like it's so hard to stay away from women because they just love me so much. But you know, I do it. I manage just fine. But obviously that's not the case. So now let's talk about present day, and also I want to share my thoughts on the prevalence of predatory and unethical behavior in spiritual communities. I think that this is a really sad, disturbing case of how some individuals can take what they promote to be a fun, welcoming community and they make it unsafe, because really what it is a way for them to be a predator. When we perceive that somebody has done something great for us or changed our life, like start a type of yoga that we love, we can begin to idolize them. And when we idolize somebody, we tend to overlook some of the things they do, or maybe try to justify the way that they treat us. Students may have seen him being very harsh or getting way too close to women during classes, but they just write it off as, oh, well, he's just from a different culture, you know, or this is just his personality, as if that would even make it okay. Since he is almost 80 years old, like, I hope that his age makes him less of a threat to women, and he's getting too old to where he can't really continue to do the same things. Should he be in prison? I think so, personally. That's my personal opinion. Not that, you know, prison, I of course there's problems with the prison industrial complex and whatever, but for folks like him, I'm for it. But since he's not in prison, I do feel like being old is kind of the next best thing. I mean, like, if, like he apparently said according to that one lawsuit that his yoga will make people live to 100 or whatever, like he could live for, you know, a good 20 more years, but like, how much physical harm can people that age do to people? They can still obviously do some, but I think it would be less, just because, I mean, obviously as you get older you get weaker and more tired and whatever. But then it's like, at the same time, Eva Orner, the Netflix documentary director, like, she said just 3 years ago that Choudhury was still acting the same way that he was in the past, and the events that we're talking about, and still there's people attending his classes as if he's this great guy who hasn't been in all these lawsuits with these women, who hasn't done any wrong, any horrible illegal things. He even has a YouTube channel with, I mean, only 1.7 thousand subscribers, but like, when I was writing this, he had just filmed or posted a video the day before, so like, he's still active on social media, and therefore, like, in person, he's still out there getting to do what he wants, living his life, probably not that affected by what he has done to these women while they live their lives, probably every single day being affected by just the reminders of what he did to them. But he is still profiting off of this. He still has a ton of supporters to this day. There are some people, of course, who they just don't care, right? There are many yoga studios that still do use the Bikram name, therefore promoting him, in my opinion. And it's like, maybe some of them don't know. I don't know how they couldn't know, right? You'd think that somebody would come into the studio and be like, oh, hey, did you hear about all this that's been going on for a decade? You know? But I do think, and I have read other people also kind of feel like these studios don't want to change the name because it will get them less customers, essentially, because the Bikram name is more well known than if they just say, oh, we're Hot Yoga Studio. But others have just changed it to be being called Hot Yoga Studios, so that's good. But as always, like, there are of course people who they just don't know. They have no clue that he's done these things, and they're unknowingly supporting somebody that they would likely be disgusted with if they knew the truth. Like, we can't be informed on everything and everyone, right? And that's part of why I wanted to make this video. I mean, despite the fact that there is a lot of media attention around this already, a full-on Netflix documentary, all that taking place over the past 10 years, he is still able to maintain the position of power that allowed him to exploit so many women. And it's like, of course, I know my video is not gonna come and save the day and, oh, now everyone's gonna know about it because I talked about it. But I still think it's important to share these kinds of stories and talk about these kinds of people and what they do and how they get away with it. It's obviously a lot more complex than what I've talked about. Like this, I would rather my videos, especially shorter ones, are kind of like seen as conversation starters. Like if I'm diving deep into something, doing a lot of research, I can't really do that anymore, like I said. So this video, hopefully take it as more of a conversation starter, and please share anything that you know about this, anything you want to say about this, opinions you have, experiences you want to share, anything that you want. Like, I would love to hear what you have to say about this down below in the comments. Over the past couple years that I've been making a lot of critical commentary videos on new age influencers and public figures, I've had a lot of people comment or send me messages with their experiences with people who have even sometimes very small levels of power, status, or wealth in like niche sections of the new age spiritual community. And because it's like, it's not all just one big like one community, it's a bunch of different little communities that all have a lot of commonalities, and it's I definitely feel like when people come into spiritual communities, not even just new age ones, right, or religious ones too, people expect it to be a group of loving, kind, respectful, like-minded people who they can trust, who they're safe around. And I'm not saying you like shouldn't feel safe or anything, but it's like when you do, when you feel like, okay, these people are good people because they're into the same things that I am, that's a perfect opportunity for a predator like Bikram Choudhury to come in and exploit that trust, exploit that feeling of safety that you had, and use it against you to get what they want. But then because of how respected and admired these people of status are in their communities, like a yoga teacher in a yoga studio community or whatever, it's really hard to come out and say bad things about this person. That it's not just like, oh, he said something mean to me one time. It's something that when you look up to somebody and you idolize somebody, even if you don't idolize them, you just are so grateful for them, to hear somebody say something about them that is so awful and vile, and you totally disagree with them doing that action, it can sometimes, I guess, be hard to reconcile with that. And I don't mean this as a defense for the people who knew what he was doing to these women. I'm just trying to explain what I personally think might have been their mindset. Like they admire this person and they don't want to have to stop admiring him. They don't want to have to acknowledge, okay, he's not who he thought he's not who I thought he was. He's not somebody that I want to support. And then you have to stop supporting them. It reminds me of creators on YouTube or other social media platforms who do really bad things. A lot of their fans who idolize them, they do not want to stop supporting this person. And so instead, they justify their actions. When you follow a creator and you watch one random video that they post from time to time, you don't really care about them, then they do something cancelable or whatever, and you don't agree with it, you're like, oh, this person's a bad person, it's easy to just like stop following them, right? When you watch somebody's videos like religiously, their videos have a large impact on your life, you really appreciate their content and all that, and then they do something you totally disagree with, that can be hard to deal with and to just decide, okay, I'm never gonna watch this person again. I mean, for some people it might be easier, but I do think that it's that kind of same mindset that people have when they look up to somebody, that they don't want to stop supporting them when they know that they've done something bad, but it doesn't affect them themselves. It's just somebody else, right? Oh, he did this to these other women. Well, I mean, that's bad, but I like his yoga, so I'm going to continue to support him. I don't know. That's just my guess. Again, I'd love to hear your opinions on it. Anyways, again, I'm not sure if this guy's like a pathological liar or if he's delusional, but I don't think anybody believes that he is in his 70s and is like this total hotshot and just gets all these women. Or he would, but you know, he refuses, right? Another possible explanation is that he doesn't believe what he's saying and he doesn't expect people to believe what he's saying, but he just tries to say stuff that he doesn't think anyone would believe in order to get more media attention and more fame, because it does seem like he's pretty intent on having that. According to a former employee who testified at one of the trials, he had boasted about some of these allegations on social media and claimed that it was good for business. Something I do wonder about, but I'm sure we'll never know, is if this was kind of a desire he had from the beginning of doing yoga, bringing yoga to the US, was using it as a way to take advantage of and do illegal things to women, or if he didn't have that intention at the beginning, but progressively as time went on, he got more and more inappropriate and continued because he was getting away with it. You know, boasting about the allegations makes it seem like he really has never cared if consequences did arise from it. Either way, this has been a really sad situation, and I hate that justice has not been served for the things that he's done to who knows how many women. I personally believe it's well over just the ones that filed lawsuits against him. This seems like a pattern of behavior that took place consistently over many years, and he, I guess, got away with it for a long time. To an extent, he's still gotten away with it, but now at least some people know. Like, thanks to Jaffa Baden, who had investigated claims from other female employees about SA and SH, and thanks to all the women who spoke up and filed lawsuits against him and all of that stuff, it of course has spared some people from being harmed by him, I would assume, but he's still out there in other parts of the world. But anyways, that's all I have to say, so thank you for watching, and please let me know any of your thoughts down below.